Hi there, and welcome to the seventh annual Mountain Air Palace Association Safety Clinic. My name is Ken Durkee, and we're glad that you're having a chance to take a look at our safety clinic. You know, flying really is fun, whether you're in a complex airplane or something like the one that you see on the screen. You know, Mountain Air is your home away from all the cares of the world. It's a place where we come to relax and forget what's going on around us. It really is a joy to fly in here. So, welcome to the Mountain Air Association Clinic. Vince Lombardi said at the beginning of every football season, "Gentlemen, this is a football." Well, for our session, ladies and gentlemen, this is an airplane. And this is also an airport. The landing area is about 45 feet long. Fortunately for Mountain Air, the airport doesn't move, and it's much longer. The airport is 2,900 feet long, and the altitude is about 4,400 feet. We're going to just welcome you aboard, talk a little bit about the clinic, some of the safety items that we are going to visit about the Asheville airspace, overview of the pattern, including the interval and glide slope, along with the attitude over the threshold. The Asheville space, you can see by the red arrow, we are up here in the upper right-hand corner of their radar chart. The Asheville Airport is in the center. And we're about 12 minutes away from the Asheville Airport by air, and you can use the Sugarloaf VOR if you want to come into it, or there are other VORs from the north if you'd like to use those. And we'll talk a little bit about minimum vectoring altitude and other airports in the area, and the Asheville extended center line and the frequencies. We'll start with the frequencies of 124.65. This is the primary frequency. However, they have another frequency which is used infrequently, which is 125.8. And there is poor radar coverage. You'll see on these two slides that the mountain range to the left of the Asheville Airport and to the right, they can't see us unless we're above 8,500 feet. And so if you want to come in lower to Mountain Air, you can do that, but you won't have radar coverage. This is an overview of the map here showing that there are some obstructions if you're approaching runway 34 at Asheville, and also runway 16 in their airspace. Location of Mountain Air, it's just above and to the left of the Atlanta Center frequency. If you're coming in from the east, you'll probably be working through Atlanta Center 125.15. And if you're coming in from the north, it'll be Tri-Cities approach at 134.42. The minimum vectoring altitude from Atlanta is probably about 8,500 feet to bring in. And you can do IFR departures at Mountain Air. They can talk to you on the deck by phone. They'll give you your clearance and then a clearance limit, and then once you're airborne and climbing up above about 7,500 to 8,000 feet, they'll be able to receive you at Asheville, and Atlanta requires that you get a little higher before they talk to you. But you can get out of IFR. There is no obstructions on either taking off on 3.2 or taking off on 1.4. As long as you get a positive rate of climb and can get above 7,000 feet in a relatively quick period of time, you won't run into anything. Let's talk a little bit about the safety items. Communications around the airport is one of the areas that we'll be talking about. The pattern, the approach, the final, your airspeed, and a little session on how to learn about flying from that will be covered in this seminar. There are 6 calls that you need to make. The first one is 5 miles or greater. Just call in with your call sign, tell them where you are, and they should report back whether or not there's any reported traffic at the airport. The second call is approaching downwind, and if there is someone else at the airport, they should respond back and say where they are so you can set up your interval. Third call is on downwind, and you can either give a gear check on downwind, or when you turn base, you can include the gear down call. It's important if you're complex that you give the gear down call. We have had people land at Mountain Air by mistake with the gear up, and so that's why we make the call. The 5th call is on final. This is one of the important calls in that that's when they turn the safety lights on around the airport, getting people off the airport. They're supposed to get off the tennis courts, and they're not supposed to drive the golf carts around the approach in at 32. So that call is really important. It's supposed to stop movement around the airport until you're clear the runway, and then be sure you call when you're clear, because that's when they turn the lights on. So from the time You make that fifth call to the time you clear the runway is not very long, and it's not an imposition on those that are playing tennis or driving their golf carts around the airport. Watch your interval. Try and give the person ahead of you at least 60 seconds of interval in the pattern, and that way when they touch down and roll out, they'll clear the runway before you touch down. And if necessary, you can widen your pattern out on downwind or on base, which allow you to have the extra difference that you need. Remember, each airplane has a different approach speed, and if the one ahead of you is slower than you are, let's say he's flying a Piper Cub and you're in a Malibu, you've got to close your rate there. So just remember that every aircraft has a different approach speed, and give them enough time so that when they touch down, you've got about 60 seconds before you touch down. Look out for stuff on the runway. We've had cars on the runway, we've had people jogging on the runway, we've had animals on the runway, we've had golf carts on the runway. So always be sure that the runway is clear of obstructions prior to landing. So not only focus on the intended point of landing, but see if there's anything else out there, and you can always go around. Now this is the pattern, and we're going from right to left, and this is a right downwind for runway 32. Try to be a 1.25 mile beam, 5,500 feet, MSL, parallel to the field, on speed. Trim the airplane up to hands off, and if the gear is down, be sure that you give the call that it's down and locked. And the reason for trimming it up hands off is that when you turn final, you don't want any other forces on the controls of the airplane, so that if you get a downdraft or a change in wind force, you can feel that in the controls and correct without having to correct for being out of trim. This is a great place to start to turn right base. I like to fly a tight pattern. 1.25 miles is a good pattern. In a high wing, this is what you see when you look out the window. If you're in a low wing, the airport will be actually behind the wing when you make the turn. This is right base. Try to be, when you're completely perpendicular, 5,000 feet mean sea level on speed, and about 500 to 1,000 feet minute rate of descent. Then when you turn onto final, this is about at the 45. You should be looking at between 4,700 feet MSL, about a half a mile out on speed on center line, and look for a solid white light in the VASI that you will see to your left. Solid minimum. If you go too low, you get a flashing red. You really would like to have a flashing white light on center line. And be sure that your windshield is clean, and the reason for that is that if you're landing late in the day and it's in the summertime, the sun is shining almost right down the runway, and with the glare it's going to make it difficult to see the runway. So be sure you have a clean windshield before you take off. Do I look okay to land here? Even though I'm right at center line, I can correct back to the left and I can make the airport all right. But we don't recommend that you land at night, because this is what it looks like at night. And you notice that you can't see anything. Here you can see the obstruction that's in the way, the trees and the little ridge line that's off to the right, and at night you can't see that. So do not land at light. Do not land at night. Be sure you line up on center line. If you have an extended wing line, you have to be careful that if you drift to the right or the left, you might hit either the ridge line or the mountain on the other side. So it's very important that you're on center line. This example here shows that the airplane is drifting to the right, and if his wingtip extends beyond the white line here off to his right wing, he could strike another airplane that's parked there. So flying on center line at Mountain Air is just important as anywhere else. And when you brake, especially if you're in a tail dragger, if you land long and brake hard, be careful it doesn't come up on your nose. There's a possibility you could do that. And watch out for birds and bugs. Sometimes they'll fly through the pattern there. Just be careful. We've had the bugs so thick that they'll cover the windscreen where you'd have difficulty seeing out. So just caution the bugs and the birds. Also, don't over-rotate on takeoff. There are no obstructions at either end of the runway. And so as you fly, just rotate normally. Fly off the end of the runway, and in some cases you may fly off with the wheels still on the runway, and that's perfectly all right. The airplane will fly. And also, when you're approaching on 32, the golf cart path goes around the edge of runway 32, and it's lower than the height of the runway. And so this picture that you see here is about the same height as you would be crossing that cart path getting ready to land on 32. Just be careful there's not somebody scooting around in a golf cart on that path. Also, here's an example where an airplane did not rotate to clear the runway. That's perfectly alright at Mountain Air. You can certainly do that. You can clear the runway and then rotate if you need to. So sometimes the density altitude is higher than 4,400 feet, sometimes it's 5,000, 5,500 feet, and you just need more runway to get airborne. Here we're going to look at attitude and the attitude of the airplane. You notice that the Cirrus is a little flatter in its attitude as it's coming into land. The Bonanza below that has a little steeper attitude and steeper glide slope coming in. It's important that you have a reasonably steep glide slope at Mountain Air, because the winds, as they come off the end of the runway and bounce around the mountain, sometimes you get a downdrafting close. So it's important that you fly the flashing white light as you're coming in and point at the numbers on the runway, so that you will be able to land properly before the 2,000 foot remaining marker, and be sure that if you do get a downdraft, you'll be able to clear the approach in the runway. Now this is too high to make it. I would recommend you go around, and it's easy to go around. You just go right down the runway. There's nothing there to bother you. The winds will bounce you around, but you can still make the go around without any trouble. Continue to fly on rollout. We sometimes have winds that will come around the corner of that first little ridge line. You've now have the ridge line that's blocking the wind after you touch down, and then you clear the 2,000 foot remaining marker, and you get a wind off your right side. Could lift your wing up and your main mount off the runway. So just be careful that you continue to fly the airplane, even though it's on the deck, all the way down the runway until you have heavy weight on the wheels, and it's taxing no faster than a man can walk. So the winds up there, sometimes we have some crosswinds, sometimes it'll lift a wing. You just have to be cautious of that and keep your hands on the controls all the way until you taxi into the tie-down area. Now on runway 32, just like on any runway, sometimes you can overshoot the runway. What do you do here? Well, if you are far enough out, you'll have time to turn back in, pull the airplane back around, get it on the center line, and land the airplane. If not, go around. There's not a problem with going around, and we recommend that if you feel uncomfortable in any way that you do that. Now, here's going in the opposite direction to land on 1-4. This is a left downwind. Again, 1.25 miles beam, 5,500 feet in the pattern, parallel to the field, on speed, gear down, trimmed up, hands off. And again, we want to be sure there are no forces on the controls as you're flying the airplane around. Here's the left base, 5,000 feet, MSL on speed, and then turn to final. Again, about a half mile out, 4,700 feet on speed, you'll be fine. Remember, the clubhouse is to the right, the parked airplanes to the left. It's very important that you stay on center line as you make this approach. Now, the airport drops out from under you, so if you can get your wheels on the deck as you pass the clubhouse, you get some friction. Otherwise, you'll float above the runway as you drift on down the runway as the airport actually falls away from you, because it's got a slope to it. So if you can get your wheels on the deck about at the clubhouse, you'll have friction as you roll downhill, and still have plenty of time to stop the airplane before the end of the runway. If you go too far, wave it off. Just take the idea that you're not going to try to correct back, not going to come back to try to make the landing, but just go ahead and do a go around and come around and try again. Here are some drawings. Here's a sample of where somebody landed long. He touched down with only 1,500 feet remaining, and you can see by that landing that he's running out of runway, even though he's got an uphill slope. So just go ahead and go around. Just put the power to it, take off, come around, and try another landing. Because if you try to stay on the runway, two options will occur. Either you don't brake hard enough and you go off the end of the runway, as you see in this drawing, or you blow a couple of tires and you end up fouling the runway, and nobody else can land until we can get your airplane clear of the runway. This is what it looks like on the wave off. Not a problem, don't worry about it. Just go ahead and do the wave off and fly right down the runway, and you'll be able to clear everything. It'll be a little bumpy, but don't let that bother you. Here's an example of an airplane that landed long, fast, even in a Cessna, and went off the end of the runway and turned upside down. Here's an airplane that was high and fast, came in, bounced off the runway, lost control of the airplane, careened into the other airplanes that were parked there, and a number of them caught on fire. And we had a tremendous amount of damage there. So have the airplane under control. Don't be fast, don't be high. Just be on speed, on control, flying the right attitude, coming in and land, and you'll be just fine. So here's a sample of it. Here's a guy on a right downwind, makes the right base, turns, lands on final, touches down with 2,300 feet remaining, is able to be under control, passing the 2,000 foot remaining mark and feeling good about it. Got weight on the wheels, doesn't have to worry about the wind picking up the wing, and he'll be able to taxi clear, park. Now, on the glide path, we recommend that you fly the flashing white light that's coming out of the VASI system. You'll have a steady in the middle and a flashing red on the bottom. But we encourage you to fly a slightly steep approach, and the reason for that again is because the winds will come off the end of 32, there'll be a little burble there, and you might have some settling in close, which makes it very uncomfortable for you. So you can fly the steady, but we recommend that you fly the flashing. But of course, if you're flying the flashing red and you get in close and get that downdraft, you'll end up against the side of the mountain and not on the runway. So with that being said, this is the clinic. We hope you enjoyed it. Clean windshield, fly around the airport professionally, be on centerline, be on speed, trim the airplane up, be at the right altitudes, and you'll be able to land very safely. We hope you enjoy your stay at Mountain Air. It's always fun to fly into Mountain Air and to spend the time there that we do. Thanks for watching.